And tonight we're going to be talking about dreams. How many of you have ever had a dream before? All right, yeah. How many of you were excited by your dream? How many of you were frightened by your dream? Yeah, how many of you just do not talk about your dream? Yeah. Okay, there's some of those out there too. How many of you have ever had a recurring dream? Yeah, there's a number of those that are happening out there. Anybody ever, GH and I were talking about this week, and we found some that we found in common, like flying. Anybody ever dreamed that they could fly? Yeah. A lot of us have. I don't know if anybody remembers it. Back in the 60s, and I was watching a Disney movie, and it was about a young Indian boy, and at the end of the movie, he just runs and takes a flying leap off a cliff. But as he leaps, he becomes an eagle and flies off. I'm like, that's awesome. I want to do that. I've always had this desire to fly, and even sometimes I've actually been in an airplane that I've never known how to fly before, and my brother-in-law is a pilot, and somehow he was teaching me and just said, okay, all you have to do is do this and go. Didn't work out so well for me. But just the idea of being able to fly. How many of you have ever had a dream where somebody is chasing you? Yes. If you have a dog like ours, you ever seen them at night go, they're trying to get away. It's like, hey, it's okay. It's a dream. Don't go back to sleep. How many of you have ever found yourself in a dream naked in front of a room full of people? Yeah. Not so many people willing to admit to that one, but there's some. How about this one? I bet this one has gotten a number of you. How many of you dreamed you showed up to school and there was a test that day and you had no idea? Okay, for some of you, that's not a dream. That's real. Yeah, it's like, there's what? There's a test today. Oh, cool. Wonder how that's going to work out. Yeah, not so good. But I've had that dream before where you're not prepared. So there's so many different kinds of dreams, and some dreams we believe there are God dreams, and then there are some you just ate too much pizza late at night. Okay, so they're just some weird things. Freud says that dreams can be a window into the subconscious. How many of you have ever gone to bed thinking about something and then worked it out while you were sleeping? I have. I've gone to bed thinking about what my sermon is. And I was telling Chris today that when I'm writing, it's like these big puzzle pieces that are all coming together, and I have to fit them all in and make sure they go in order. But sometimes I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to say it. And in the middle of the night, it's like, bam, there it is. I kept, for a long time, keep a notepad right by the bed because I've also tried that. Oh, that is so cool. I'll remember that in the morning. Yet not. So you have to write it down. When God gives it to you, you got to write it down. But Freud says it can be that window into that subconscious, saying there's some things that are still percolating, going on, and in the middle of the night. But listen to this. So some people want to have their dreams interpreted. And so sometimes they'll go to a therapist or something, and there's a story about a man who went to a therapist, and the therapist said, well, tell me about your dreams. And he said, well, I've had a couple of dreams this week, and the first one is that I was a wigwam. He said, wow, you were a wigwam. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. He said, what was your other dream? He said, the other dream that I was a teepee. And he goes, oh, I see, I get it. And he's like, what? The therapist says, I get it. One's a wigwam, one's a teepee. You're just two tents. Yeah, okay. This side of the room got it. This side, in the middle of the night, you're going to wake up and go, what? Oh, you're just two tents. Okay, yeah. So as we're wrapping up this Everyday God series, we're going to be talking about seeing or experiencing God through dreams. And we have evidence where God says in Joel that he would speak to people in dreams. He spoke to many of the prophets in dreams. And even Joseph and Daniel, Joseph The Joseph that was in Babylon, if you remember, he was given the ability to interpret dreams, and even Jacob as well. But Daniel, when he was there, and Joseph and Daniel in Babylon, and Joseph, remember the Joseph of the coat of many colors, and he had this dream. Now, when the dream was interpreted, it was, oh, all my older brothers are going to bow down to me. How did it work out for him? Not so good, right? Because they said, yeah, okay, Mr. Special One, we're going to sell you into slavery, and that's how he ended up getting into Egypt. But then he also ended up thrown in prison, but he got out of prison because he was able to interpret the Pharaoh's dreams. And so dreams can have some kind of God meaning behind them. Now, today we're going to talk about one of the early dreamers, and that is Jacob. And let me just give you the lowdown. Let me give you the 411 on Jacob. When Jews talk about their ancestry, they always talk about being in the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Isaac was the son of Abraham. Remember, Abraham was he was going to kill his son because God said to, but he saved him right at the last moment, said, okay, now I know you're going to be faithful. So Isaac got to live, and he got to have a family, and he had actually two sons, Jacob, and anybody remember the other one? Esau, that's right. They were twins, but actually Esau was just a little bit older. So Jacob had a twin brother who was Esau, and he was just a little bit older. And it was the custom for the fathers to pass on the blessing, including all the wealth, to the oldest son. And so it's coming time. Isaac is getting older. He's now blind. He can't hardly see. And it's about time to give the blessing to Esau. Now, Esau, let me give you a little bit about him. He was, in fact, Esau means ruddy complected. He was an outdoorsy kind of guy. He was the hunter. He was the one that would go off and bring in wild game and all that. Now, Jacob was more of a mama's boy. He was more the indoorsy type. He didn't like to go out hunting and all that kind of stuff, and he stuck closer to home. And one time when Esau is coming back, he is starving, he is famished, and Jacob says, I'll be glad to give you some of my stew if you'll give me your birthright. And so for the price of a bowl of stew, he gave up his birthright. So now it's time for the blessing, and Isaac is still thinking he's going to give the blessing to his oldest son, which is Esau. But while Esau is away, Mama has her favorite, okay? And she wants Jacob to get the blessing. Anybody know what Jacob means, by the way? Jacob, it means deceiver, okay? And you're saying, a deceiver? This is the one that is being used by God? Yeah. I think that's good news. The more that I looked into the Bible and I saw the kind of people that God were using, I was like, man, these are imperfect people. Maybe God can use me too. And that actually gave me inspiration and gave me hope. So while Esau is away, Isaac says, it's time, and bring my son before me for the blessing. And so Mama goes out, gets the hair of a goat and puts it on, because Esau's arms are real hairy. And also, he also smelled like the outdoors. And so he needed to feel like it. He needed to smell like it. And so he said, come, my son. And so Mama pushes Jacob up to the front of the line and says, here is your son. Here is your oldest son. And she basically gave him the blessing by trickeration. She was deceiving of her own husband because she wanted Jacob to get the blessing. And so if you know the story, then Jacob ended up getting the blessing. And Isaac gave the blessing to him and prayed for God to be with him and gave him all the power, gave him all the wealth, gave him all the blessing. And then suddenly they get word that Esau is coming home. And when he finds out what his brother has done, he sets out to kill him. Like, That's it. I can't believe you've done this to me. You dirty dog. You're my own brother. And if I ever catch you, if I ever see you, I'm going to kill you. And so Jacob has to run for it. He's fleeing away because of his own deception. Now, let's see how God can use even imperfect people in his perfect plan. Let's take a look at Genesis chapter 28, verses 10 through 22. And so it says, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. And when he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And there above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. You will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. And he called the place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. And then Jacob made a vow and saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So do you get the picture here? So we have Abraham, we have Isaac, and now Jacob has taken the place. Even though it was by deception, God is still not unaware of what's going on. But yet he can even use and, yes, transform imperfect people. So let me tell you what's going on here is that you have all these things that Jacob and his mom and all the deception, all the things they were doing. And certainly Jacob would have known about God because God was the father or God of Abraham, his grandfather. He was the God of Isaac. And so both his grandfather and his father likely would have told him stories about God. But listen to this, because maybe some of you are here tonight, is that maybe you're like Jacob. And before this experience at Bethel, then he was someone who had religion. He had his grandfather's religion, his father's religion, and he knew about God, but he had no experience on his own. And maybe, just maybe, that's the way that he was living his life. It was kind of like, hey, eat, drink, and be merry. Go out, get whatever you want, even if you have to deceive somebody to do it. Is that not how a lot of people treat people in business today? It's just business, even if you have to lie, even if you have to cheat, if you have to steal. And yet those people, some of them call themselves Christian. But what I would say to them is you have religion, but you do not have a relationship. Because when you have a relationship with God, you are changed. You are transformed. And let me say this, that everybody needs to have their own Bethel. So when we see this in the story where Jacob he's tired, he's been journeying, he's been running from his brother, and he finally stops for the night. And having no place to lay his head, he pulls up a rock. And so I call this the original Hard Rock Hotel. I don't know. Works for me. Yeah. Because he had nothing else. All he had was a rock. And so can you imagine how uncomfortable that must be? But when we're deceiving people, we're not going to have a life of comfort. We're going to be running from people, and we're going to be uncomfortable with that. And so he places this rock under his head, but as he goes to sleep, he has no idea what's coming. But it's in the middle of that God comes to him and speaks to him, who identifies himself and says, I am the God of your grandfather Abraham. I am the God of your father Isaac, and I will be your God. And if you will stick with me, then your descendants will own this very land. Now, it was actually called something else at this time. But when Jacob wakes up, he realizes, and it says he was even afraid. Anybody ever been there? Are you still living on the religion of your parent, of your grandparents? Maybe it's you have mental assent. Maybe you're just kind of aware of it. And yet it really doesn't mean a whole lot to you until you have this experience with God. John Wesley called it the heartwarming experience. John was a preacher. He was raised in a godly family. He knew everything. His father was a preacher. Even his mother, who was not supposed to be, was a preacher and a Bible study teacher. The whole family knew everything about the Bible inside and out. And yet for John Wesley, it was religion. He was trying to do all the right things. And it wasn't until he went back from America and back over to England, and where he had his heartwarming experience, when he realized that God was real, that God had forgiven him of his sins, and it's by grace alone that he was saved. It was the heartwarming experience, and as far as I know, it's the only one that he ever had, but it was life transforming. It was life-changing. It was no longer something that he talked about some aloof or distant God somewhere else. It's one that he knew personally. Many of you, you've been trying to do all the right things. Many of you, your entire life. Maybe you grew up in church. Some of you found out there's something missing, and you started coming to church to say, what's going on? And if there's more to life, then tell me about it. And I'm telling you, yes, there is. And yes, you've come to the right place. But I'm also telling you that you need your own Bethel experience. How many people want to say, well, how do you do that? How do you get God to come to you? Well, maybe for some of you, this week it's happened for you. When you're praying for the Holy Spirit, when you're remembering God every single day, when you're seeing God at work every day around you, even though you don't know it. Remember what Jacob said? He said, surely God is in this place. This is Bethel. This is the house of God. Now, he didn't have the doctrine of omnipresence at that point. So he didn't know that God was everywhere. And so he thought there's one place. But it's because it's where God came and met him in that place. But he said, surely God was in this place, and I never even knew it. For those of you who know what it was like after the resurrection, and for those two disciples that were going to Emmaus, and they were walking with the resurrected Jesus, and they didn't even know it until he began to pray for their meal, and suddenly he was revealed to them. Suddenly they had their Bethel experience. They realized that the resurrected Christ is right there. It's no longer a story. It's no longer something that they'd heard about. Now it's something that they have experienced. Let me take you to another passage in the New Testament when we ask that question, how can we do this? And first of all, I have to ask you, are you really hungry for it? Because if you're not hungry for it, you're not going to be finding God. But when you are hungry, when you are desperate, when you are thirsty, when you want to be quenched with the power of the Holy Spirit, then you will begin looking for God. But listen to what Jesus tells Nathanael. So in the New Testament, where you could turn there if you'd like to, and into John chapter 1. And this is right at the end when he's calling his disciples forward. And he's talking to Nathanael. And he said, Nathanael, you will know who I am. Listen to this. Because you will see angels ascending and descending on me. Do you get that? Jesus is saying, I'm the bridge. I'm the holy escalator if you want. You're going to see angels coming from heaven and going back and forth. And anybody who wants a relationship with my Father must come through me. But all those who are hungry, all those who are thirsty, Jesus says, seek and you will find. Knock. The door will be open. I will come in and eat with you and you with me. I want to ask you this evening, where are you? Are you somebody that has religion in your life? You're just trying to do the best you can, try to get by, try to understand what the heck the preacher's talking about. Or are you somebody who is desperate for your own Bethel experience? God is real. God created everything. But he also wanted us to be in relationship with him. We have one job in this life, and that is to get to know him. And he wants to make himself known, and he wants to reveal himself to us. But we have to be willing to open our hearts, to open the door, to invite him in. And when we will do that, then we will have our own Bethel experience.